Alrighty, greetings there, all of my fellow Chun-Li warriors, and welcome back to another Sage's Dojo session. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a time capsule dojo session. Here we're going back in time, as requested and as promptly shown to be the case. One of our fellow Chun-Li warriors has mentioned that there isn't a beginner's guide, which is kind of true. There are a lot of these sessions that do have more beginner related topics being discussed and being trained in. However, there is no actual dedicated beginner's guide to this character or this game. So I wanted to go ahead and, as requested, go ahead and discuss things for those that are up and coming. Now, those that are more familiar with the game, you can feel free to stay tuned, as of course we're going to be going over fundamentals and such. And of course, the fundamentals are extremely important in whatever art or skill it is that you're doing. It's always good to brush up on the fundamentals, in the words of Geralt of Rivia. But, with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, first thing I want to go ahead and say is that welcome aboard. For those that are a little bit new to fighting games or to Street Fighter in general, um, I go by the name of Sage Armageddon, also known as Omega as my CFN on this game. A little bit about my acumen. I have been playing fighting games, basically casually, I guess you could say, for probably since the earliest fighting game I think I played were like Bloody Roar, Dead or Alive, but I had no idea what I was doing. I just kind of played those games, the single player and things of that nature. I only started playing online with other people around the time of Street Fighter 4, but I was horrendous. During that time, I didn't really train or anything like that. I just kind of played the game. I also played Marvel vs. Capcom 3 with my friends. It wasn't until Street Fighter Cross Tekken where I had that eureka moment that made me come to want to dig a little bit deeper into fighting games and see what they were all about, because Cross Tekken was a easy enough to grasp fighting game that I was able to actually pick up on some of the fundamentals, and then I just took it from there. And other games that I've played, of course, are Soul Calibur, mainly Soul Calibur 4. I've played a lot of Tekken 7. I played Tekken 8 for a few months when it dropped, but stopped playing that game because we didn't really like the vision of that game. It wasn't very good. I'm a defensive player, and it wasn't Tekken 8 was not very good on those that wanted to play defense. A lot of modern fighting games try to push for offense. But we're not going to get too much into that. But yeah, I have a pretty decent acumen of playing quite a number of different fighting games, right? Um, so, but if you're new to Street Fighter, welcome. If you're new to Chun-Li, also welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started with some of the fundamentals here. I might also divide this into multiple sections just so that we can go over certain things, right? Now, of course, as you might know, this is obviously a two-dimensional fighting game. 2D fighting games are usually obviously known for only having horizontal and half vertical movement. Obviously, you can't jump down. That's kind of not possible here, but you can jump up and you can move back and forward and stuff like that. And fundamentally, a 2D games don't have lateral movement like games like Tekken or Dead or Alive or Soul Calibur. So you can't sidestep moves or anything like that. So these types of games are about controlling space, and they're usually a little bit faster when it comes to the frame advantage type thing. If as you can see that the big bar, two bars right underneath Chun-Li's left knee there, you see that where it says startup total advantage. The top bar is for you. The bottom bar is for your dummy. Right? They basically both give the same detailed information, but they are, one is for you, one is for your dummy. Like, this is not really a frame data type video. This is for beginners, but just so that you know what that is. To help give a bit of a preface, so you see how it says that next to startup it says 4F. That stands for 4 frames. This is the fastest move that any character can do in the game. It's 4 frames, right? Just to put it into a bit into perspective, Tekken, which is a 3D fighting game, outside of a few very specific moves, the fastest standard move, which is usually a jab, is 10 frames. Think about that. The fastest move in Tekken is equivalent to something like this. So this is a jab in Tekken. Look at the difference in speed, right? If you can visualize that, you can see that compared to 3D fighting games, 2D fighting games are on a completely different level when it comes to how twitchy and reactive you have to be. And there are some games that probably have frames that are lower than that, 3 frames, 2 frames, right? Like for example, your hero arena style, anime style games, like maybe Guilty Gear or Marvel vs. Capcom, Dragon Ball Fighters. Those are like the pinnacle of crack speed when it comes to fighting games. But Street Fighter's no slouch when it comes to that. Every time I play this game, I can feel my lesser reaction speed of only about 305 milliseconds on average. Unfortunately, it kind of holds me back in this game, and I can feel it every time I play it. But you know, it's a bit more fast paced, right? That's kind of how 2D games are, and it's mainly about controlling space, right? So that's the main thing that it is. That's usually how you win, is by suffocating your opponent, by eliminating their ability to actually do what it is that they need to do to try to win. Now, understanding that is the easy part, but figuring out exactly what each character or player wants to do to try to win is the insanely hard part that we're not going to go too much into detail here, but just so that you have a fundamental understanding of what these types of games are, right? So, as we probably know, Chun-Li is a classic character. She's very well known in fighting games, and she is in the Street Fighter lore, the strongest woman in the world, basically. So she is very strong in terms of hierarchy. I'm not that big into the Street Fighter lore, but I think that she can beat most of the cast outside of the top tiers like Ryu, Akuma, Bison. But most of the characters she can actually beat, right? So she's pretty strong. Now, I wouldn't say that it's represented as well into her gameplay per se, but in terms of the lore, she is pretty strong, right? So now that we got that a bit of preamble out of the way, so Armageddon, how do we go about playing this character and playing this game? Well, of course, we want to do some more general fundamentals, of course, for just a bit. This isn't going to be a complete general Street Fighter beginner's guide. It's more for Chun-Li specifically, but we want to go over some things just for, those that aren't as familiar. Of course, obviously, you mainly have 6 different attack buttons, right? Obviously, square is your jab, typically the fastest attack in the game. I'm speaking, pardon me, let me make a brief introduction. I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody that's using a pad. I'm using the PS5 controller. I'm not using a keyboard or an Xbox controller or anything like that. So I don't know if I can really give the exact rhetoric about this. For example, this is considered a 5 medium punch. I can't really give the exact rhetoric when it comes to that numbering system because I'm not too familiar with it. However, I will try to do the best that I can to include other peripherals that are being used. But you have your jab, which is the fastest type of attack. You have your second fastest attack, which is your light kick, light punch, light kick, right? And then obviously you have your medium punch and medium kick. And then you have your heavy punch and heavy kick, right? Light, medium, and heavy for punches and kicks. That's how it is in Street Fighter, right? It's different in other games, but this is how it is in Street Fighter. So the purpose behind these types of buttons are your light moves are they're not the most damaging, and they don't lead to the greatest setups and things of that nature per se on their own. However, they are very low committal. What that means is it's very hard for your opponent to punish you for doing this. Even the highest level players, that there might be some anomalies out there that are, some legendary human beings that possess reaction speed that far surpasses a normal person's. But outside of those very rare individuals, your quote unquote average person, even pros, can't really react to something like this. So if you're doing this, let's get Ryu to do it. All right, there we go. If you're doing that and somebody punishes you for it, let's go ahead and actually get him to do one instead. There we go. If you're doing that and somebody actually, let's get him to repeat it. My apologies. There we go. If you're doing that and somebody punishes you for that, it was luck. They just threw the button out and then you just happen to get hit. Like nobody, if you're fighting somebody and they actually punish you for that, it's either you have a very predictable rhythm or they got lucky. There is no in between. Obviously, you can stop them from being able to read your rhythm by not doing this the exact same time and having a rhythm behind it, right? If you have a disjointed, if you have a rhythm that's harder to follow, they're not going to be able to actively look for that and then punish you for it, right? It's just not going to happen. These usually don't go very far, but they're also very low committal. They can be interruptive for when people try to do things that require a lot of startup, like this. If you're just doing this, it's gonna be a little bit harder for them to get you. Ryu's getting me because he's somehow managing to get in between the gaps in my jabs. But generally speaking, it's actually kind of hard to drive rush through that, right? Especially with slower moves. Right, see that? Now the reason he's getting me when I try to do it here is because he's on rhythm to go in between the jabs. But if I just wait a minute. Now the closer you are, the easier it's going to be to stop that, but I don't want to digress too much. So these can be very interruptive. They can be used to kind of pester and poke at your opponent and annoy them, right? Your light kicks, depending on which one it is. Now, depending on what character it's going to be a little different. But they're usually, some of them are lows, which means that, let's go ahead and make sure that Ryu doesn't try to be cute here. Which means your opponent has to block low in order to, you see how he's ducking? Right now he's standing, right? Notice how he's going to duck. See that? That's because it's a low. You can tell if it's a low if they duck to block it. Right? So that's obviously hitting low. Your opponent has to guard low in order to be able to stop that, right? So, these are, it's going to be different. This isn't going to be an exhaustive deep dive, but it's a little bit different, right? Your medium attacks are farther reaching, of course. They're like a good balance in between the light and heavy attacks. They're fast. I mean, they're a little bit slower, but they're not too slow where you're in the danger zone constantly. But they're not the fastest either, so it is possible to get interrupted out of these. You typically don't want to use these types of moves when you're this close to your opponent. Now, there are some where you do want to use it, and we're going to discuss that in specific detail for Chun-Li specifically a bit more. But when you're this close to your opponent, you usually want to do your light attacks. Right? You usually don't want to use medium attacks unless you have a very specific reason for doing so, right? Medium attacks are usually around this range right here. Right. Some further, some shorter, depending on the character. but these are normally pretty good pokes. Um, your arm or leg will also stays out much longer than a jab, so this can be even more interruptive. So it's more likely that if somebody tries to do something like that, that they're gonna get checked out of it like this. You see that? Now you can't mash it because it takes a little bit longer to recover. But if you throw this out, it's a lot more interruptive and it's harder for them to get through, right? So these are very good pokes for trying to keep people out and things of that nature. Now, your heavy moves, all right, you can stop that, Ryu, please, thank you. Your heavy moves are the heaviest committed things that you can do, pretty much. They can lead to very big damage, but they are usually, they put you in a very bad predicament when you use them. Without going into too much detail, try to make sure that when you're playing, that you don't use these too much. You usually want to use these types of moves when your opponent makes a very large oopsie. Let's say, for example, if Ryu did something like this. These heavy moves are the most damaging, and they're usually used to get really big damage. That's usually their purpose. All right, you typically don't want to throw these out randomly unless you have a very specific reason. If you watch very high-level players play, they almost never just throw this stuff out. If they are throwing it out, they have a very good reason for doing so. It's probably because it stops something that their opponent is trying to do, or it has a very unique property that makes it useful. But in general, you don't want to throw these out, right? Yeah, that's going to be it for those specific types of moves. You got light, medium, and heavy, and you got one for your punches and kicks, right? And that's pretty much the basic breakdown of those. Obviously, if you want to block, you can walk back like this, or you can just crouch block like this, holding down back, right? If you are crouch blocking, your opponent can only hit you with overheads, throws, or any move that hits overhead. An example of an overhead, so if I get Ryu to block here, block low for me, please. So, and we're going to get you to, let's see how we're going to do this. We're going to get you to, if we get him to block all, unfortunately, he's going to, okay, I don't know if I can really set it up that way, but when somebody's crouching like this, you can hit them with overhead moves. Technically speaking, they can block anything else. You see how he's still crouching? Now, if we do an overhead, he's going to stand block. Now, like I said, I can't get the bot to just, I don't think I can get the bot to just sit there and only block. Okay, crouch block only. That's how we're going to do that. Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I had to figure that one. I haven't actually used that training setting, but as you can see, nothing else is going to work. Right? Going to block everything. But he can be hit with overheads. He can also be hit with jumping attacks. Like this. Fortunately, Chun-Li's head stomp is not it does not hit overhead, so you don't have to stand to block that. But you can, any other jumping, not any other, but most jumping attacks can hit people that are crouching. They are treated as overheads. That's one of the reasons why jumping is very annoying in this game, right? But if you're crouch blocking, you only have to worry about your opponent throwing you, and you only have to worry about overheads or jumping attacks, right? Pretty much. There are also some special moves that are overheads as well, right? And if you're in the corner, drive impact, drive impact is, I said, I don't want to make this too much of a general basic guide to Street Fighter, but drive impact is a very powerful move that, as you probably already know, it requires 3 hits on you in order to break it. So in order to break drive impact, you must be hit 3 times, which almost never happens, or you must or you can block it, but blocking it when you're in a corner is bad because then it opens you up to get hit by a combo, right? That's part of the reason why being in the corner is bad news, right? But if you're anywhere else, you can just block it, right? Or you can parry it as well, like this. If we get Ryu to go ahead and do drive impact, we can just parry it, or we can do drive impact ourselves to counter it and get a combo. We can jump over it, and we can also throw them out of it. Right? Somehow he's hit me out of that. You can throw them out of it, or you can hit them 3 times. Like this, right? So, that's drive impact. Very powerful mechanic. You have your drive rush, of course, which is used to not only get in quickly, but it's also used in certain setups to give you an advantage. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that because this is supposed to be a Chun-Li video. Just going over a bit of, some of the more practical things that apply to Chun-Li a little bit as well. So, what else? I think that's pretty much it for all that we need to know on like the absolute basics before we get into Chun-Li specifically. If needed, if anybody has any requests, I can also make a video about just general Street Fighter basics as well. But that covers a lot of them to a very basic degree. Most of everything else is going to be a little bit more advanced than that. So those are like the most general basics in the breakdown that I'm able to give for the most part on a lot of the things that you're going to want to be worried about as a beginner to intermediate player, right? So now with that, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the juicy stuff, right? Let's go ahead and set Ryu back to regular block, and then we're going to have it so that you stand block. Okay, cool. So Chun-Li is, many characters can be played differently, but certain characters have an archetype that they tend to be more effective with. For example, Ryu is known as a Shoto. He's a typical all-round character. He can go on the offense decently well. He can play defense decently well. And he's just kind of all around. He's like a jack of all trades, quote unquote, master of none, right? That type of idea. Chun-Li is that kind of, she's a little bit like that, but I would say she leans more towards a defensive character, not quite as much as a character like Guile, but she's more of a defensive character than, say, Ryu or Ken, right? And the reason for that, I know that there are a lot of players that be like, no, Chun-Li, you can rush down with her. You can rush down with turtle characters. Like, for example, Sagat is technically a turtle character. Guile is also technically a turtle character. But when I'm playing Guile specifically, even though I'm not very effective with Guile, I find it easier to rush people down with him than with Chun-Li, right? To be honest with you, because he has certain setups that just makes it a lot easier to catch people that like to try to press when you're pressuring them. So I find it easier to rush people down with him than Chun-Li. All right. I know some people might find that crazy, but I personally find it a little easier. But he's technically a turtle character. You can rush down with most characters in this game. There are some characters that have almost no tools for that, like JP or Dawson. They have almost zero tools that allow them to rush down. Chun-Li can kind of rush you down. She can play more aggressively. She does have the tools to allow her to go on the offense, but it's not her specialty. Her specialty is more of a punishing defensive type. You have some characters that are defensive in terms of being a turtle, like Guile or Ryu. Well, Ryu's more all-rounded, but he can also be played like a turtle, right? But you have some characters that are more like Guile, he just wants to throw fireballs and then hit you with an anti-air if you jump through the air when you try to jump over the fireballs. Chun-Li wants you to make mistakes so that she can punish you for it. For example, if we're saying that we're fighting Ryu, and he throws out a button like this, right? She wants to catch you doing something like that and then punish you for it, right? Um, for those that are curious, it's a beginner's guide. So with punishing, I'm just going to give a. I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's simply catching your opponent when they completely miss a move. It's when they don't make contact with you at all. If you block the move, or if you get hit by the move in your face, obviously they didn't whiff, right? Whiffing is typically bad, especially for heavy moves. That's why I mentioned not to throw out heavy moves like this, like crazy. You can whiff moves like this though, because it's almost impossible for somebody to punish you for this unless they just guess right, or you're just being insanely predictable, right? But when people whiff, that is a big no-no. As a matter of fact, that's how the pros play. They're so good that their defense is it's very hard to open them up with tricks and stuff like that. So pro players, in order to get other pro players, they play mind games to get people to whiff stuff so that they can, you see, because you can't block while you're doing that. Ryu is wide open, right? We got him dead to rights here. So that's what a whiff is, right? But if Ryu whiffs that, that's what Chun-Li is supposed to do. She's supposed to catch people she's supposed to catch people making mistakes and then punish them for it. That's kind of what she wants to do. And that's a part of the reason why this character is so hard, is because in fighting games, offense is one of the easier things to do. Something that you're going to see in Street Fighter, something that you're going to see in Tekken, something that you're going to see in Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves. Almost any fighting game at more beginner to intermediate levels, you're going to see people doing crazy stuff like this. You're going to see people pushing a lot of buttons, right? Doing a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of that, a lot of jab, drive, impact, a lot of this. Especially at the very low ranks like iron, bronze, silver, gold, and stuff like that. As you grow in the ranks, people still mash a lot, but their mash becomes more refined. Instead of doing something crazy like this, they might just do something like this, right? When you get to like high platinum or diamond, right? They're still going to be mashing a lot of buttons, but they're going to be a little bit better at not at making sure that they're getting the most out of the buttons, right? But when you start playing at like a higher intermediate to advanced level, like when you get to around master rank, that's where your defense starts to matter. Offense is pretty easy to do. All you have to do is master your character and then just run with it from there, right? So running offense is not the hardest thing to do. A lot of people get it mixed up because people that aren't aware see that they're winning games when they do this. But what ends up happening usually is when you have somebody that's all offense and they don't take time to actually learn defense, they hit, as the main man Sweet from Tekken states, they hit a brick wall going 200 miles per hour, and then they just start losing every game because all the people that they are fighting know how to play around or stop all of the mashing. They know how to deal with it. They know how to check it. They know how to stop it, and all of that, right? So yeah, these poor souls, they're just pressing buttons, and they're knowledge checking people. Which of course, a knowledge check is something that is very difficult to deal with unless you actually know specifically what to do. For example, let me see if I can give an example of a knowledge check. Let's go ahead and pick Kimberly for a minute here. Where is she? There she is. Now let's say that you have Kimberly's. Let's say that they do something like this. Well, not that. How do you do it again? I think she just runs. Okay, I think I got it now. Let's try this. There we go. Let's say you have a Kimberly player that does... Oh my goodness. That, and then they do this. It's like, man, I don't know which one they're going to do. I tried to block. I block it this time, and then the next time they do it, they just throw me, and I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. That's a knowledge check. If you don't know what to do about it, then you lose. And Kimberly can also just do that. So if she goes to do it, and she just stops it right there, right? She can punish you for trying to hit her out of the air that way. See what I'm saying? So in the middle of a high impact fight, it's hard to know what to do about that. She can just punish you for doing that, right? So how do you deal with this? That. See, this is an example of, and even though she landed, she didn't actually finish that there. She can't actually punish us for doing this. It recovers too quickly. But I don't want to get too much into the matchup stuff. But that's just an example of what a knowledge check is. So if people are winning by doing this, that just means that their opponents don't know what to do, right? And beginner to intermediate levels of play, this is all people are doing is just running their strategies on people. And when both players are doing that, it kind of equals out. You have Kimberly versus like Ken or something like that. It's a balanced fight for the most part because they can both, whoever gets their opponent in the tornado first is probably going to win the round, right? But one of the things about Chun-Li is Chun-Li can't really put her opponents in a tornado like that. She doesn't have the tools to do it. Most characters, when they knock you down, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Ryu for just a moment. Actually, let's use Juri. Like, if we take control of Juri, a lot of characters, when they knock you down, they can just do this crap right here. Or they can do something like this. Oh, wait, not that. All right. Something like that, and then like you're confused because it's like you don't know what to do, right? Chun-Li, without getting too much into detail, can't do that. So because she cannot do that, you can't run offense on people all day. She also doesn't have a lot of knowledge check stuff. The closest thing that Chun-Li has to a knowledge check is between this and this. Right. Head stomps, you can go for an overhead, you can go into a low, you can do all that stuff, right? Those are the closest things that Chun-Li has to knowledge checks. But she still kind of can't abuse that, even to people that don't know how to fight Chun-Li. When I fight them, they still find a way out of that very easily by just jumping or something like that, because they can jump out. If they jump out, you can miss the legs because you have to, there is no... It's not going to be the same rhythm every time, depending on how far you are from your opponent, depending on where you land on your opponent, depending on if they jump, if they press the button. What you're going to do is going to be different every time with this. You see how that kick missed the second time? It hits this time, but it misses this time because my timing was different, right? So because of that, it's actually not that hard to fight your way out of head stomps. I fought plenty of players that don't really, I can tell they don't know how to fight Chun-Li and they still get their way out of it. But you have some characters like Ken or Sagat that or Kimberly especially, if you don't know how to deal with that mess, they can just destroy your soul for no reason at all, right? I'm pretty sure those that have fought these characters, you know what I'm talking about. Cammy, that's another one. If you don't know how to check their nonsense, you just die. And that's not really a lack of skill, it's a lack of knowledge. That's why it's called a knowledge check. And that's what people that are mashing buttons all day do when they go on offense. Right? And that's why developers are pushing fighting games to be more offensive, so that way newer players feel like they're not so far behind, because if the game is more about defense, people that are more experienced in the game are going to absolutely demolish newcomers, because defense requires knowledge and experience, which they don't have, right? So they make games where you can rush your opponents down and stuff like that. But that's neither here or there at this point. I think you get the point of what I mean, right? So back to the topic at hand. That's what makes our mistress Chun Li here such a difficult character to play. Is that she can't knowledge check people all day, especially out here in the open. Um, she doesn't have a lot of tricks. She has no tricks or gimmicks, I should say. She doesn't have like any tricks or gimmicks. This is the closest thing, but this is just jumping. If somebody can't check this, that means that they can't stop this either. Or let's say with a different character. If they can't stop Chun-Li from doing this, that means that they have problems with this too, which is just people jumping. People are going to jump in this game, and it's our job to be able to stop them, right? So this isn't really that much of a gimmick, right? Even though it's treated like one. The head stomps aren't really much of a gimmick. They're not, these are not unfair maneuvers. I've fought plenty of people that have been able to find their way out of it. Even before I really knew this character, I didn't get cooked by people doing this or head stomps, right? It just didn't really work that way. So she's a no nonsense character. She's pretty honest, to be fair, right? She doesn't have any like gimmicks or tricks or stuff like that. She does have the fireball, low forward, medium kick, drive rush stuff that you hear people talking about all the time. But because she can't just grab you all day long, its effectiveness is tremendously diminished without going too much into detail for that. And that's going to be for another video. But she's a defensive character. All of her tools point towards effective defense. This is probably her most efficient anti-air. And it checks most people when they jump through the air, right? So she also has this anti-air. She also has this anti-air. She also has this anti-air. Lots of ways to stop your opponent from doing things, right? And most characters don't have anywhere close to that many anti-airs, right? She also she has really good punish tool. This is not very good for offense. This is a defensive tool. Same with this, right? But I think we get the point. So our mistress Chun-Li, the strongest woman in the world, she is a more defensively oriented character that wants to be more around this range and using her movement speed and pokes to catch people when they mess up. So she's going to be harder because playing defense in fighting games is like 99% of the time harder than playing offense. Maybe there's a one fighting game out there where playing defense is super easy, but most competitive games, playing defense is difficult because it requires knowledge, practice, and training, right? So because she's more of a defensive character, like Kazuya or Jin from Tekken 7 or Tekken 8, she's going to be harder to pick than other characters. You're going to have a lot of characters in the roster that are more beginner friendly, like Ryu, Ken, Cammy, Kimberly, Marissa, Luke, Akuma, Mai. I would even argue Sagat, right? Sagat. Probably Rashid, because Rashid mixes me up all day. Terry, Jury, Lily. A lot of these characters are just so freaking, like, they're much, Dyson, that's another one, are much easier to use because they can just rush you down all day, right? So playing defense is very hard. That's the main reason why this character is so difficult, right? Among other reasons. Now that we know what our mistress mainly wants to try to do, what type of archetype she is, so how do we use her? So depending on how you play specifically, which I will come out with a video about discovering more about learning how you play as a player. But depending on how you want to play, you can play hyper aggressive. She is well-rounded enough to do that, but it's not going to be the caliber of, say, your Jury or your Kimberly or your Ken or Cammy. She doesn't have the tools to play super duper aggressive, but you can do it. If we were to set the bot up here to replicate the defense of a we're gonna put random block on, and then we're going to let's go ahead and pick Ryu for this one because I have him set up for this already. Oh no, actually, I'm mistaken. I have Ken set up for it. Let's get Ken. Yep, so let's make sure we got the settings right. Yeah, random block, and then we're gonna go ahead and get Ken to set that up on wake up, and then to set this up on block. So we pretty much have him set up to randomly pick to do a light jab or to do nothing at all. To try and random block to try to impersonate an actual player blocking or defending themselves, right? As much as we can. So Chun-Li, you can kind of play more aggressive. Right, you can do things like this. Throw a fireball. Right. No, she doesn't have the best tools to do it, but she has some of them, and we'll be going over them. You can play a little bit more in between, where you're playing around this range and you're just poking at your opponent, being annoying, right? Throwing fireballs, things of that nature. Looking for whiffs, and poke play styles. They typically rush down play styles. Obviously, rely on overwhelming offense, on knowledge checking your opponent and or mixing them up in order to get damage. Playing offensively is typically the easiest way to play most characters. Poking is where you combine offense and defense. You aggravate your opponent by constantly throwing little jabs at them like this. You don't do a lot of damage most of the time, but the damage adds up over time, right? And then you have a defense. You have somebody that is actively being a turtle. Their job is to keep you out and to punish you anytime that you try to invade their space. So we're going to go ahead and actually, so, if you wanted to play more defensively, obviously with Chun-Li, you want to throw fireballs. And then if they try to jump, you would anti-air them with your anti-air tools. And you would use your buttons to play keep out. Your goal is to frustrate them and suffocate them into trying to rush you down. Now, it's usually a good idea if you can interchange between these three, because some character matchups require differences. For example, if you're fighting JP, you absolutely cannot play a turtle matchup because you're going to get annihilated. No character in the game can out turtle JP. Every character has to rush him down, from Guile to Akuma, Dawson. Every character in the game has to attack him, right? You can't really play a turtle game against JP. You have to really kind of try to rush him down or push buttons at him, right? So sometimes a matchup is so severe and extreme that it will force you to play differently. But generally speaking, you can, once you discover which area you like to play with most, then you can kind of work with it from there. With that being said, now let's go ahead and do a breakdown of Chun-Li's toolkit here. Obviously, we have her light attacks. This isn't going to be exhaustive, but I'm going to go over the more important tools that you're going to want to use. She has her jab. As you've probably heard, this is one of the best jabs in the game. It's disjointed, which means that it goes out pretty far, but her hurt box, which is the part of her that the opponent can interact with to actually do damage to you, is kind of disconnected. So it makes it so that this move just kind of has priority over quite a few things in the game. So if you and your opponent are both jabbing like this at each other, the rule of thumb is that Chun-Li is supposed to win the exchange more often than not, right? She also has her range goes further than most characters in the game. Not all of them, but characters around this more average size frame. She has like the farthest reaching jab, right? So this is a really good tool. Aggressively, you can use this to try to push your opponent down, right? Right, and then go for a throw. This can be very suffocating if you know how to use it in combination with her movement speed. You can jab them and then take a step back, right? So it can be used aggressively. It can be used when you're just playing a poke game. Not as much because it doesn't have that much range for all the way over here. This is where you would use moves like this, right? Or this. And it can be used defensively back here, but this is mainly when your opponent is trying to rush you down, right? Or if we say that Ken does something like this, which is what he's going to want to do, right? All right, what's Ken doing? Right, there you go. You can, you might be able to jab them. It's a little bit hard, but depending on how far back you are, but you can, if they're encroaching on your space, you can try to jab them out of that, right? So it's more effective for playing aggressive or poking. So this tool is going to be more effective. Okay, Ken, let's get you to stop doing crazy stuff for me for a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and turn these off for a moment. So yeah, this tool is going to be better suited for aggressive play and more poking, playing like a snake, just, you know, jabbing at your opponent, irritating them, than it is going to be for defense, right? Her crouch jab is not as important. Her crouch jab is more for if you're crouching and when your opponent is pressuring you. And let's say that your opponent is doing something like this. Let's go ahead and I am not pushing kick. That's interesting. How am I getting kick? There really is. So there might be something wrong with this controller, but let's try that again. All right, okay. Let's say Kid does something like that. All right. Hey, you're trying to find like a hole in his defense or something like that. You're crouching because obviously you don't want him to hit your ankles with a low, right? Well, let's say that Ken does something like this. He tries to walk up and throw you. Hey, you call him out on doing something that's fake, right? That's what this jab is primarily used for. It's used defensively for when your opponent is attacking you, pretty much. Obviously, if you're going on the offense, you're probably not going to go for this. You're probably just going to do this, right? This has far better range. Look at the range difference. You see that? So, you know, you're probably going to do this. They're the same speed, pretty much. Almost everything about them is the same, except this one is more disjointed and it goes further. So this is for when people are slamming buttons in your face and you found an opening in their offense. Right? That's what this is for. This is, you can use this to stop certain approaches if your opponent is trying to do things like this. This is probably more reliable than this because it goes out farther. This move actually goes further and it stays out a little bit longer. Right. You see how much easier it is to stop him from doing that than with the punch? You see that? So it can be used to stop people from approaching. It also can be just used to pressure people when you're out of jab range because it does go further than this. See? So if you're too far for this to hit, this is your next best friend. It's a little bit slower and it stays out longer, but it's still really hard to punish this. It can also be used to punish certain things. For example, if Ken does something like this, That's the infamous Jinrai bullcrap that is, I'm not doing it right, actually, I don't think. Let me see. How does Ken do his... I think it's... There we go. Right. Ken is infamous for this bullcrap. If you fought Ken, you know what I'm talking about, right? Actually, we're gonna undo that last, like, 20 seconds or so. So, Ken is known for doing his Jinrai bullcrap here. Or at least he was. I don't know if they nerfed it or not. They might have nerfed it. But, you know, there are some things that people might do that they can, that are a knowledge check, like we mentioned earlier. Right. It's like a, you see, you can't really... I can't punish him for doing that. But some characters, if they don't space it properly, you can actually catch them with this. Now, Ken, I can't catch him with that per se, but there are some characters that they will do something like that, that none of your other moves can... See, he's -5 on that. Some characters, when they're -5, that means the only thing that you can catch them with is a move that is faster than that. It is either -5 or faster. So that means you can only use a move that is 5 frames or faster. Right. So, which aren't a lot. There are very few moves that are faster than that. And then technically this and this are faster. These are faster, but they don't reach him. He's too far. And technically this is too far to reach him, but there are other characters that might do things that are -5. Actually, let me give you a much better example. Something that if you fought the Scourge that is Bison, I'm pretty sure that you know what I'm talking about, right? Right. See, you see the bar at the bottom there. It says that he's a -5 advantage. It's that orange number with the letter F. -5 frames. So if you have a Bison, if you're fighting Bison, and he's just abusing this, you're like, I don't know what to do about it, right? And he's doing it, and you can't. And he's doing it, and it's pushing him too far out for you to actually punish for doing it because the jab doesn't reach him. I'm not spacing it properly. Let me see if I can space it properly enough. That should do the trick. And actually, a little bit further. That should do it. I need him to step back like this. There we go. See, I can't reach him. Now, technically speaking, this can't reach him either, but I've fought Bisons before where I can't jab them if they space it a certain way. This move is hard to punish with a jab a lot of the times. Now, this isn't spacing it correctly, so you still can, but if they space it in such a way, this will be a way to punish it. And I'm messing that up there. See? So there's some things that you have to use this because it can punish it because it just goes just far enough to get them, right? Hopefully you understand the point, even though I am not doing a very good job of showcasing it here. Sorry, I don't use these characters like that, so I don't know how to set up their moves a lot, but I do know that before they buffed Chun-Li, some of Chun-Li's stuff, this was how I punished Bisons for doing that. Now I can use this, but we're not going to go too far into that. So, this is very good for punishing certain things that when we get more into frame, this is a beginner's guide, so don't worry too much about the frame data, right? I know I'm talking about it, but I just want to make sure that you know where my logic is coming from with that. But you don't have to worry too much about that. This is just the beginner's guide. We're going to have more intermediate stuff later on for that specifically. But it's good for stuffing your opponent when they try to rush you down with bullcrap. It's also just good for reaching people. Pretty good poke, right? That's what you use that for. This is pretty much, it's like your jab, except it hits low. It doesn't go as far, but if your opponent, if sometimes you can catch your opponent standing. Sometimes people aren't watching their ankles or they could be blocking and their finger slips, and then next thing you know, they're getting hit. It happens to me all the time, where I get hit by my opponent mashing lows because my finger slipped on the thumbstick a little bit, right? So that's pretty much what this is for. It's to check your opponent's ankles, to catch them lacking. What else do we have? That's it for her light attacks, pretty much. Medium attacks, perfect. So, this is her most important medium attacks are going to be this, right, and this. The four limbs of the forbidden one, I guess you could call it. Right? Pretty much what this is let's get Bison to block here. This is a pressure tool, and to stop mashing in our face. Apologies for that. Okay. This is pretty much a pressure tool. This doesn't have a lot of range, so this is for aggression. This is literally only for people that when you're playing more aggressively. You can't really use this to poke people at this range because it has no range on it, right? Why use this when you could use that? And back here, you can't really use it that much either. Because her arm doesn't stay out for long enough. Not as long as this does or this does, right? So this is exclusively a pressure tool. And without getting too much into the more advanced stuff with frame data, you are at an advantage when you do this. So if you just take my word for it, if you do this and your opponent blocks it, you can immediately do this afterwards. And if they press something, it's going to beat them if they press any of their normal buttons. It's not invincible. Certain characters, there are certain things that they can do to get out of it. For example, if we get Bison to... First, let me show you what I mean here. We're going to get him to crouch jab, which his crouch jab is 4 frames, so it's fast, right? One of the fastest buttons in the game. Every character has... I think every character has a 4-frame jab, which is the fastest attack in the game. So if we get him to do that on block, if I do something like this and then try to push square or try to do my standing light jab, he's going to win. Right? If I do something like this and then try to do my jab, he's going to win. He's going to beat these because he has an advantage. Like I said, we're not going to get too much in the frame data, but just take my word for it for right now. He wins. If I do this and try to press a light attack, he wins. If I do this and we push a light attack, we trade. So that means both of our moves should work. Right. Now, the reason why the standing one isn't working is... Oh, there we go. I wasn't timing it right. So, I'm not going to get into the reasons for it, but they will trade here. Right. But this, I win every time. That's because you have something called frame advantage. And frame advantage pretty much means that it's still your turn, basically. If your opponent tries to press any buttons like this, any of these normal buttons, or a lot of special buttons, not all of them, we're going to get into that, but any of these, a lot of these special buttons, if they try to do something like that, if they try to jump, this is going to beat them. Let's go ahead and try to see if we can get him to try to jump as well. See? He's going to lose all of that. If he tries to do any of his... Bison specifically, if he tries to do any of his special moves, let's say that we try to get him to do something like this. He loses. It's not invincible though. There are some things that can beat it. Something that they can use to beat this. They can do something. This is hard to do though. They can parry you, but it's hard. But unless they get a perfect parry, it's not really gonna make that much of a difference, right? It's not easy to perfect parry this. But if somebody gets a perfect parry, let's say if we get Bison to do something like this. See, normally I can't punish him for doing that. He's actually he's actually +1 on that. Now that I realize it, I can't punish him for doing that. But if I parry it, I can punish him. So it would be the same thing if your opponent manages to parry your jab. But it's not easy to parry something this fast, right? So that's technically something that they can do. They can technically do a super. Now you want to pay attention to the bar at the bottom of the screen, as you can see underneath at the bottom left corner and right corner. That's our super meter. Every character has a level 1, 2, and 3 super. And depending on which strength, that's how much meter it's going to take. If they use a level 1 super, that's going to take 1 bar off of that 3. So if I use my level 1, I have 2 now. If I use my level 2, I have 1 bar. And if I use my level 3, I have 0, right? Obviously, you need the bars to, if you try to use level 3 with 2 bars, you can't use it, right? So, now, the reason for these is they're usually used for damage or very specific, or they have very specific setup scenarios that you can use. But they can also be used to get the opponent off of you if you're being suffocated by offense. So if we get Bison to do his knee press nightmare, see, he could technically mash through this sequence, even though we have plus frames here. But it's very hard, even for high-level players, to get a super out when you're slamming buttons in their face like this, right? So that's almost a no-go. An example of something somebody can do that is very common through that is something called an OD reversal, which not every character has. Bison, for example, does not have this. See that? He can do that. So there are some things that can stop it, but unless your opponent does something like that, they can't, and none of their buttons will work. You can use this pretty safely, for the most part. If you fight somebody that's doing like Ryu is doing here, don't be too scared of that, because if they keep doing that, it's going to cost them in the long run. Even if you're just a beginner, try not to be too worried about people mashing their OD reversals like that. You don't want to get in the habit of being scared of it. Trust me on that. It's a good thing when they do this. It's forcing them closer and closer to a very bad situation called burnout, right? That we'll be going over most likely in another video. But you can, outside of those 2 or 3 things, which are all very hard to do against these very fast attacks, the bot can do them because the bot is just inputting the attacks immediately, right? It doesn't have to do all. If you see my inputs on the left side of the screen, it doesn't have to do all of this stuff to get it. It's just instantaneous, just immediate. There's no time in between. But if you're fighting an actual player and you do something like this, it's like an extremely low chance that they're going to bust out a super or an OD reversal against you, unless you're just being super obvious and you keep doing it over and over again. But if you vary up your timing, right, and you do different things, they're not going to be able to make that call very easily. So it's safe to do it. But pretty much any of their normal buttons, this wins every time, right? So that's what this move is for. I know that was a long drawn out explanation. But that's pretty much what this move is for. It's for aggression. If your opponent blocks this, then you can pretty much murder them to death for it, right? Not to be too macabre, but now you can't. You only get one frame of advantage. So take my word for it. The only real thing that you can use off of this is this move here. This is like the only thing that you can really do off of it. If you try to do something else, they can still beat you. I'm gonna showcase that. I'm gonna do that into this. See? Or how about that into this? Same thing. How about that into this? Same thing. You could technically do it into this, but this move has such... It doesn't have enough range. Because it's not reaching him in time, he's still winning, right? So when you take my word for it, you only really want to use this move off of this sequence. So that's what this move is for. It's for pressuring your opponents. As you become more acclimated and familiar and comfortable playing the game, you'll get used to using this sequence more. It's going to come up a lot more, especially when you get to like Diamond and Master rank and stuff like that. So that's what this move is for. Her other medium punch, this is one of her best pokes. It's disjointed just like her jab, which means that it doesn't have priority per se, but it's going to win out in a lot of exchanges that you're going to have with your opponent. So if we get him to do something like that, usually you're going to win or trade. It's actually pretty hard to beat hers if you space it and time it right? So, see? But it goes farther. It goes farther than Ryu's attack there, that's for sure. See, he can't reach me here. But I can get him. See how far that is? That goes far. It goes pretty far for a medium attack. That goes for most characters in the game, right? So for Chun-Li, this is definitely one of her better moves. You use this to harass people, and you use it to whiff punish. So if you catch your opponent out here, and they're doing something like this, and they throw this button on and they whiff it, oh, you're dead now, buddy. All right, that's pretty much what that's used for. It can also segue into pressure. Let's get Ryu to stop doing that here. It can also segue into pressure. This, remember we're talking about this? This is difficult to use because if you're starting out at this range, how are you going to get to your opponent without being hit? You can't just walk up to them unless they are just scared and not pressing anything. They're just afraid of you, right? But most people, especially in the lower ranks, they're slamming buttons like crazy, so you can't just walk up to them without getting hit. So how do we get to them? We get to them by using Drive Rush off of this. And to do a Drive Rush, you can... Not every move is Drive Rush cancelable. But the moves that are, this is Drive Rush cancelable. To Drive Rush after a move, you double tap forward, or you tap, if you have the default controls, you tap the, for the PlayStation controller, the left trigger. Or L2. For Xbox, it's probably just called the left trigger, right? I'm not sure what key you would use or how you would use a hitbox controller or an arcade stick to do that. But on the consoles, you can shortcut it to just pushing the left trigger, right? That's probably the easiest way to do it. Double tapping forward is something that I do because I am a masochist that likes to make things as hard for myself as possible. But I'm starting to learn how to use the left trigger a little bit more for specific reasons, just because it makes using this character a little easier, a lot less stressful. But that's how you do a Drive Rush, right? That's it. This isn't a video about the mechanics of the game, but that's how you do a Drive Rush. You can't do that with every move. You can't do that with this. You can't do that with this. But you can do it off of this. 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 So this can lead into this, right? They can't interrupt this sequence with a button. It's kind of like this right here. This, everything that I told you about this is also true for this. If you do this from this distance, this gives you an approach vector to get close to your opponent without having to try to clear this space. So if you poke at your opponent out here, you can go into something like that, right? And then start doing your stuff from there. So that's one of the uses that this move has. It can be used to punish people when they whiff, like we showed just a moment ago. You had Ryu whiff his button. Like so, right? And then I punished him for doing that. It can be used as an approach vector. So this can be useful for aggressive play. If you're an aggressive player and you want to weigh in, now you can really start pressuring your opponent. Right? See that? It can be used for somebody that likes to poke and just do a little bit of damage by catching your opponent messing up. And then you could either just end it there if they mess up. But it's highly recommended that you do something off of that, right? So, and then if you're a defensive player, this is a keep out tool. If your opponent tries to rush you down with bullcrap like this while you're all the way back here, you can actually hit them out of this. I have to time it right. My reaction speed is not the best, so forgive me. But you can pretty much poke them out of their drive rushes, right? You do have to time it. If you don't time it right, they can kill you for it. But if you've got good, decent reaction speed, it shouldn't be too hard for you to check them out of this with this, right? So this is going to be useful for all of the different types of play styles that the three general common basic play styles that you're going to use. Other medium kicks. This move right here is pretty much an anti-air. This is a very specific move. It can also be used in very specific matchups to help keep your opponent from doing things that are difficult to deal with, but that's not going to be for this video. This is mainly an anti-air. This is my go-to anti-air that I personally use because doing her dedicated anti-air, which is this move, is pretty difficult to do. If you're not on moderate, if you're not using modern controls, it seems easy to do it. It's like, oh, you just double tap down. That's easier than doing a dragon punch motion. The thing about it is with the dragon punch motion, you can kind of shortcut it out. So if you're blocking, you can immediately just go into it. Chun-Li, you cannot go from blocking into this. See? You have to stop crouching completely. You can't cheese this out. It has to be strictly down. That's the only way it's gonna work. But Ryu, see, I don't even have to stand up. I can even just do something like this. Chun-Li, I can't do that. See? And because of that, that makes it so that when you're playing and your opponent decides that they want to jump randomly, it's very hard when you're crouch blocking to do this unless you know that they're gonna do it. But if you don't know they're gonna do it and you don't see it coming and you're just doing stuff like this and you try to go for her dedicated anti-air tensho kicks, more often than not you're gonna get kicked. If you watch even very high level Chun-Li players, outside of like pro players, even like Ultimate Master and Grandmaster Chun-Li players don't use this anti-air to stop people from jumping. They use this because it's faster and it's easier to just pull this out, right? It's not as effective because you can get hit out of it. See, whereas you can't get hit out of it. Well, we're not going to discuss the bullcrap that is this right here, but technically speaking, you're not supposed to be able to get hit out of this. It's supposed to be invincible to anybody that's not on the ground. right? If they're in the air, it's supposed to have full invincibility when you first use it. So technically speaking, this is the best anti-air, and we're going to get to it, quote unquote, the best, but because of how hard it is to do on reaction, this is the go-to anti-air for pretty much most Chun-Li players that I watch, and even myself. That's what this move is primarily used for. You don't really use this move to poke at people, though you can if you are if you really are brave and you know what you're doing. You can use this move to stop things like this, right? But it's not ideal. There are better moves for doing that. But in a more advanced video, I'll go over this a little bit more. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of this move. It's mainly used to keep people out of the air. And the reason why you want to keep people out of the air is going to be for another video. But just take my word for it. You don't want people to jump. So if you see them doing this, you want to make sure that you can practice and learn how to do this move to keep them out of the air, right? And I will be having a separate dojo session. I actually have a dojo session about anti-airing, but I can make one that's a little bit more beginner friendly if it's necessary, if that anti-airing video if it's not making sense for you, right? But you don't want people to jump. Without getting into the specifics of it, take my word for it, you will win more games and you will advance faster if you keep them out of the air. Trust me on that. That's something that you will hear people say a lot, from pros to anything else. They will tell you, stop people from jumping. It's true. You don't want people to jump. You want to try to stop them. That's pretty much what this move, that's the only thing you really need to be concerned about with this move for right now. Nothing else specific. Next up, we have her crouch medium kick. This is her best move, easily. It hits low, so your opponent does have to block low. So it's going to be easier to hit them than with this move. It goes a little bit further than this move does, right? Now it's a little bit, technically speaking, it's a little bit more unsafe to do. Your opponent can't punish you for doing this. There's nothing fast enough to punish you. It doesn't matter how close you are. Technically, you can get punished for doing this, but it's hard. Because you're not going to be in their face doing this. If you're in their face, you're going to be using buttons like this, right? You're going to be using this from out here. And when you're doing this from out here, I don't know if there's a character in the game that can punish you for doing this, because it pushes them away from you. See that? Even if they block it, it pushes them away. So for people that are playing aggressively, this is probably an even better tool and easier to use, kind of like what we did with this, to get in. Like this, right? And very similarly, if your opponent tries to do something, you're going to win that exchange. Same rule as with this, and same rule as with this. This is the same type of thing. Both of these sequences make it so that your opponent's normal buttons cannot be used against you, pretty much. But same thing here, same thing with here. This move can be used interchangeably with this, but this move is honestly probably just better, just because it goes further and they have to block it. It also has more pushback, which will be as you become more advanced at the game, will be more useful for you. But this move right here, this is going to be your go-to poke. That's it. This move still has its applications. This is probably better to stop people from just trying to do this all day, but you can still use this too. It's probably just not as effective as this, right? But you can still use it. This is like Chun-Li's best move, right? It goes really far. You can drive rush off of it. So back to the main point here. So if you're an aggressive player, you can use this as an approach vector to get close to your opponent safely. so that you can start your offensive aggressive game plan, right? If you're a pokey character, you can use this to poke at your opponent and annoy them. For if they just get Ryu to stop blocking for a moment. And just stuff like this, right? Now you do want to be careful because we're not going to go too much into it, but you do want to be careful about canceling into your special moves here, because your opponent can because something like this can be punished, and I'm going to show you that here. We're going to get Ryu to go ahead and do this again. Right. So you don't want to just do this, per se. So don't follow my example with it, but if you know that you hit your opponent and they're not blocking, then then you can go ahead and go into this move or something like that, right? We're going to go over how to structure offense in another video. As a matter of fact, I'll most likely have a dojo session about how to structure offense effectively. But yeah, you can use this to poke people. You can use it aggressively, and it can be used kind of as a keep out tool as well, though moves like this are probably better for that. And that's pretty much it for all of her medium attacks. Next, we got the heavy button. Now for the heavy punches, you have this move, and this move. This move here is strange. So the way this move works, let's go ahead and get Ryu to block, is now actually let's get him to stay like that. On hit, this move doesn't do that much. You can't really do too much with it, right? So you can't combo off of it on just a regular hit. Nothing. This is the fastest attack you can get, and it doesn't combo. It allows him to block afterwards, right? So you can't combo off of this. So what is this move used for? Well, there are some strange properties. This isn't going to be as important for you for now, but if your opponent blocks, you see how they're blocking my attack? If you look underneath Ryu's health bar, you see those green rectangle things? There are 6 of them. If you look at the one at the far right, when I hit Ryu, you see how it's going. He's losing that, right? Now, depending on how strong the attack is, light attacks do just a little baby smidget of it. Medium attacks do a little bit more. Yeah, heavy attacks do a little bit more. See, 3 heavy attacks and that meter is completely gone. It takes like 1,000 light attacks to get rid of it. It takes 4 medium attacks to get rid of it. And it takes 3 heavy attacks to get rid of it. But this move, it only takes 2 of them. And actually, as you can see, it took off a little bit of the second one too. So this move does a lot more than most characters in the game. It does a lot of drive gauge damage. So, but that's not going to be as important for you here, but just so that you know what the purpose of the move is if your opponent blocks it, pretty much. So if your opponent's not blocking or anything, then what is the purpose of this move? Well, the best way to really use this move is if your opponent is they're doing this whoops, not that. They do something and they make a big whoopsie like that. Kind of like what we did here, right? Remember this? Whiff punish. This is a whiff punish tool. Because if you catch somebody whiffing a move, you see that big right behind Chun-Li when I hit him. If I time it correctly. You see that big red banner that says punish counter. We're not going to go too much into that in this specific video, but that's a good thing for you to have. If you see that flag appear, all of a sudden you can combo off of this. Whereas if you don't have a punish counter, I can't do this. If Ryu is just not blocking and I hit him, I can't do that. But if Ryu whiffs a button and we get that punish counter flag, all of a sudden I can do a full combo on it, right? So this move is used to catch people whiffing. However, it is such a slow move that most players don't use it. If you pay very close attention to even high level Chun-Li players, Grandmaster, Ultimate Master, Legend level players, they very, very rarely use this move. It's only used in very specific situations, and the main things with reasons for it is because you can't remember what we were saying about being able to drive rush cancel off of a lot of these moves. The moves that you can drive rush cancel off of, you can also cancel into drive impact. And this is important because if you're a newer player, you're going to catch people doing this bullcrap all the freaking time. You probably already have experienced it plenty of times, right? You're going to catch them doing this bullcrap like all day long. And when you do moves like the moves that I recommended, like this, you can cancel into it. You see your opponent doing that, say, oh, no, you're not going to get away with that. But if your opponent does it when you're doing this move, you are dead because you can't cancel it. There's nothing you can do, right? And because of how dangerous drive impact is, as you can see, this move does not have as much use. That's the big reason why you don't see players using it. And if you're just trying to catch your opponent whiffing, like this, you can use something like this. It doesn't go as far as this, but it goes far enough and it's faster. So you have more time to catch them whiffing, right? Even if I respond late, I'm still getting that punish counter and I have poor reflexes. My reaction speed is not really good, right? See that? But with this one, oh wait, let's turn this punish counter off so that we can make sure that's real, right? See, I'm still punishing him. See that? I got all day. I messed it up there, but I got all day to punish him pretty much. You can do this late and still catch him. But with this move, it's a lot harder. You pretty much have to... Now, it's easier now because I actually know that Ryu is going to whiff. If you know that they're going to whiff a button, it's not very hard to catch them. But if we were to set it up so that what he does is random, let's go ahead and then we're going to do something like that. And then we're going to go ahead and let's set that to 3. And let's say Ryu is random with it. It's a lot harder now. See? Because I don't know he's going to do it. See, we don't know when he's going to do it. There's no pattern now. See? I have no idea when he's going to do that. See? He's really breaking my neck here. Oh, he got me that time. Just waiting for him to do it. Like I said, I have poor reaction speed, so it's a lot harder to catch people doing this stuff for me. He's not doing it. There you go. I still caught him with that. Now imagine if I try to use the heavy version. See that? Hopefully that makes sense. So with that being out of the way, this is used to punish people for whiffing, but it's hard. It is very hard to catch people whiffing with this character, with this move specifically. You have to have very good reaction speed to really make use of this, or if you're doing something called a space trap, but we're not going to talk about that too much in this. So this move has very niche uses. I implore you as a newer or intermediate Chun-Li player, try not to use this move if you have the habit of using it. When you're playing online, try to focus on playing without this move. It's going to make things easier for you in the long run. Just take my word for it, even if you don't understand um, the exact reason why you don't want to use this just yet. But just trust me on that, right? It's not the best move that you have, right? Judging by our success here, maybe I don't think it will be that reliable. But maybe it's very possible that it could end up being pretty reliable. But it remains to be seen. I mean, it's not bad so far, if I'm being honest. They might have made, I need to check some of the older patch notes. They might have made a change to it. Not that bad. Actually, let's try Ken. Let's get Ken to jump at us. He's notorious for having a extremely obnoxious jumping heavy punch. It goes, his hurt box is like way up there. Yeah, if you can hit Ken out of this mess, then this might actually be a pretty decent anti-air. Let's get him to do it earlier like that. Yeah, I mean, that anti-air is. Yeah, I mean, Ken's jumping heavy punch is known to be very annoying to deal with. So it seems to be working as a decent anti-air. So you could probably use this as an anti-air too. But its main applications are typically very strange situations. For certain matchups, that's going to be obviously for a more advanced tech video. But it's also used in combos if you're trying to do the more optimal stuff. Here we're not really going to be learning optimal combos, but just to give you an example of like a more optimal combo looks like. Because this does quite a bit of damage. We're going to go ahead and make sure Ken isn't doing anything strange, and then we're going to turn block off. And then we're going to turn punish counter on, pretend that Ken whiffs something. So a more optimal damage combo would be something like this, right? Starting with this. Notice how it goes into this move. And if you do it in the corner, you actually end up doing that sequence more than once. See the crouching heavy punch? See? And that's an optimal combo. That's like Chun-Li's most damaging combo that she can get, not counting critical arts. So, which is basically a level 3 super. When your health is below a certain threshold, it actually does a little bit more damage. So, outside of that, that's the most damaging combo this character has so far. Yeah, this is used in combos. It looks like this might be a decent anti-air. If this can be used as an anti-air, my thoughts and personal judgments on Chun-Li might be elevated a little bit, because this will take a lot off of that whole mental stack thing. I always complain about other characters having a crouch heavy punch anti-air. Maybe I could start using this to anti-air people. I'll test it out. But yeah, that's pretty much our crouch heavy punch. Next up, we got her. This is one of her special heavy punches. It's back heavy punch. This move is typically used in very specific setups to give you an advantage over your opponent, and even used in combos. As you saw that combo that we, some of the combos that we do, this is used as a part of the combo extender, right? Something like this, or something like this as well. You can just do it this way too, right? So that's the main reason this is used. This is also useful for certain setups, like if you do a spinning bird. Like I said, we're not going to be going too much into like her setups and stuff like that in this video because this is a beginner video, but just so that you can see some applications for this move to help pique your interest, right? Something like this. And I actually mistimed that. Let me try that again. Yep, something like that. Or something like this. And I messed that up. Let's try it again. Always messing up the head stomps on me. Yep, something like that. So that's one of the main applications, and you saw how it can be useful in combos. Um, Another combo example is this. Notice how it's branching into the head um, from the crouch medium kick into the standing medium punch into back heavy punch into her lightning legs. So it's used for a lot of combos and stuff like that. In terms of just in the neutral, this move doesn't have a lot of range, but it is very, very meaty. The best way I can describe it is that this is a move that it's like a wall. If a move stays out for a while, that means that your opponent has more time to run into it, right? So this could also be probably used to stuff. This can be used to stuff certain approaches, like this, right? You do have to be careful with it and time it correctly, because if you miss it, it's got quite a bit of recovery. So you're dead to rights if your opponent catches you whiffing this in neutral. That's what we were saying earlier about heavy moves. When you're using heavy moves, you want to make sure that you are very judicious with how you use them, because if you just throw them out like crazy, newer beginner or intermediate players are going to be mashing so hard you're probably going to get hit, and higher level players like master rank and higher and stuff like that, they're just going to straight up punish you for whiffing. So like if we were to pretend we have Ken do something like this, see, that's the type of thing that can happen. You just get punched in the mouth for missing that. So you do want to be careful, but it's like a wall. It can be used to stuff approaches, and in more intermediate or advanced guides, I will show you how to use this a lot more. But like I said, it makes a pretty good wall if you know how to use it effectively. But for a beginner, you don't have to worry too much about this outside of combos, right? So. But yeah, that's her back heavy punch. Combos and certain setups. And next we're gonna get to the heavy kick. Now next we have her sweep. This used to be like the safest sweep in the game. Unfortunately, it's not so much anymore. There are some characters that can punish her for this because you are very negative for doing this. So I'm pretty sure that there are plenty of characters that can tag you if you try to do that. Let's go ahead and set Ken to do a heavy punch on block. Let's go ahead and turn block on, sorry. Actually, it's negative. I'm sorry, it's -9. Let's get Ken to do, is this a minor misjudgment there? Let's go ahead and get him to do a crouching medium kick instead. See, there we go. Now I'm gonna try to do it for max range and see what happens. Yeah, you can still catch me. This used to be pretty much impossible to punish, which means you can just throw it out. That's for what sweeps are used for. You will see a lot of newer players use sweeps as they're like, because of the range. If they're like from really far, they're going to throw out a sweep because it's generally one of the farthest reaching moves you can get. This goes pretty far, right? Chun-Li was able to get away with it before, but they patched it, so it's easy to punish this now. Sweeps are... You want to stay away from using this. It's the same thing with this button here. You don't want to just throw sweeps out willy-nilly. If you're trying to catch your opponent at a range, I would encourage you to move a little bit closer. If you're too far away to hit with one of these, so you try to go for a sweep instead, just move a little bit closer and use one of these moves. Trust me, it's going to help you in the long run. You don't want to get in the habit of using this. If you are in the habit of using this, try to, in the next games that you play, even if you lose, try to focus on not using it. It's going to take focus, and when you're not focusing on what's happening, it's going to get you to, it's going to cause you to lose games. When you're learning to do things that you're not comfortable with, it's going to cause you to lose, but it will be worth it because it'll help you win more in the long run. So you want to try to break this habit if you have it. This is not a good move to throw out real willy-nilly. You can take my word for that, right? If you're wondering what the use for it is, it's a little bit more intermediate to advanced, but the sweep is used to catch people in certain situations. Let's say that you have a situation where your opponent backs up. We're not going to get into super advanced stuff, but let's say that your opponent is backing up in order to screw you over somehow in some way. With that understood, with that in mind, if you know that they're going to back up, like if they do some stuff like this, and then they just walk back. Let me go ahead. I think I messed that up here. Let's go ahead and restart that. And then they back up like this, and you know they're doing it. This is what a sweep is for, because obviously when somebody is moving backwards, they can't block. You can't block and move back at the same time. It's impossible in this game. So if they are walking backwards, you're going to hit them. So this is a specific tool to call out and counter people that are walking back. You will get a knockdown on them, and then you can run some of your strategy from there. But we're not going to be worrying about all of that right now. For now, as a beginner, try not to utilize this move. If you are a beginner with just Chun-Li, but you're more familiar with this game, and you would say that you're intermediate to a master in this game, then you probably already know how to use a sweep, so you can use it. But for those that are just really trying to learn, I would advise to stay away from this as much as you can, just to prevent any bad habits from being formed. And then we got her standing heavy kick. This is if you do heavy kick without pressing anything. This move has very niche uses. It is used for certain pressure situations. But its primary use is a very damaging anti-air. This is one of the most punishing anti-airs in the game, but it is very slow and you have to space it properly, because if your opponent jumps at you, let's get him to do a different jump. If your opponent jumps at you and they jump from too close, it's going to be very hard to hit them, because the hitbox for it is going pretty far out. So this is often used from about this range to catch people jumping. It can be tricky, because sometimes when people jump and they attack, they will hit you clean out of this, because it is slow. And if you have slower reaction speed like me, it's going to be hard to just catch random jump-ins with this. I usually set people up and try to trick them into jumping by throwing fireballs. Like if I'm fighting a Zangief or something, or I'm a Non, I will throw the fireballs and then I will wait for them to jump and then use this. But if you got fast reaction speed, you can catch them. This allows you to get a butt ton of damage if you catch your opponent with this. That's very damaging for an anti-air. Just to contrast, this is what this anti-air would do. 600 damage. This would do about 1200 damage. And if we switch to Ken for a moment, that's about 1200 to 1400 damage right there, right? So look how much damage you're putting on the table for hitting somebody out of there. It's higher risk, but it's a much higher reward. People will almost certainly stop jumping if you can nail them with this. And you can even get far more damaging things with it, but it's this is not recommended for for beginners. It's a little advanced. I'm just dropping it right now. You can get a freak ton of damage with it. Take a look at that. For jumping, right? So she can really murk you for for just jumping randomly, right? But it's high risk, high reward. I would not recommend using this anti-air for beginners unless you just really want to try to get used to it. Especially if you're more aggressive, you're not going to really be using this move too much. You can use it for pressure, but for beginners, I wouldn't recommend it. Using it for pressure is going to be for more advanced players that really understand matchups and stuff like that. That way you can, because your opponent can crouch this. This move will be absolutely god tier otherwise. But if your opponent is crouching, like if they're doing something like this, oops, this is just going to completely miss, right? And then they can just destroy your soul from there, right? So that's the reason you don't want to just throw this out, and it's slow. But it's not the worst thing in the world. This move is probably a little bit better than this, but it also shares the same property in which if you use this, your opponent can mass drive impact through it, and there's nothing you can do about it if they catch you because you can't cancel it. So that's another reason you don't want to throw it out. But unlike this move, which you can't do anything with this if you just hit your opponent or they block it, it's not really that good to use this move just randomly in neutral because you can't really get anything from it. This one you can. So this is a very specialized move. But like I said, it's high risk. It's mainly going to be used as an anti-air. For beginners, I would not recommend using this button in neutral randomly. Same thing with this one. Stay away from this button until you become more familiar with the game and how you can use it appropriately. But yeah, that's going to be her standing heavy punch. Mainly going to be useful for defensive players that like to camp way back out here and throw fireballs, right? And in certain matchups as well. But yeah, that's her standing heavy kick. And the last normal, I'm pretty sure that we have it. Well, I think there's one more after this. We have this move right here. This is actually her forward and heavy kick. This move is also a very specific application. If you play Tekken, you're probably familiar with crushing moves. Tekken has high attacks, mid attacks, and low attacks. If you are crouching, high attacks will go over your head. That's not the case in this game for the most part. So if we get Ken to do something like this, it's generally not the case, but there are some things that do kind of treat it like Tekken. For example, Ken can't hit us with that move while we're all the way down here, right? So some of Tekken's high, mid, low properties come into this game, but they're very rare. But that's one of the exceptions, right? But yeah, very, very few exceptions to that. More often than not, crushing moves are not in this game. But that's what this is for. In Tekken, this would be called a low crush move, which means that it avoids low attacks, which is pretty much what it's useful for. Your opponent, if you call your opponent out mashing lows a lot, then you can just hit them with this. As you can see, if you just get a regular hit with it, it doesn't really do anything. You can't do too much with it. You can't even get a combo with it at all. So this is a very specific use case. You catch your opponent messing up like that, and then you can get a combo. Right. More advanced stuff. This is going to be more like intermediate to advanced, or just in the advanced and further on. That's when you're going to start using stuff like this. Most Chun-Li players don't use this. It's very, very, very specific. So you don't really have any need to add this to your repertoire. Shout out to Gambado Gaming for anybody that knows this channel on YouTube. Awesome content. But yeah, that's pretty much what this is for. And that's almost all that it's used for. Some people use it in specific combos. I've seen some people do something like if they push their opponent into a wall like this, they'll do something like that. And then go into a combo, but I'm not too familiar with it because I don't use drive impact. But other than very, very niche situations, you don't have to worry about this move. Feel free to experiment with it if you get to a point where you want to try to incorporate it. But it's pretty much going to be used to punish people for using lows. You have to make a hard call because Chun-Li has the unfortunate thing where if you use her moves that avoid things, unlike characters like Kimberly, who can basically be inside of a projectile and still slide under it and hit you from across the screen.
I don't have
Um,
time to play.
Chun-Li has to do this almost completely before they even do the low. So if we get Ken to do that again, if you just press it too late, it won't do anything. So you can't do it right as you see them press it, and if you are in range, you have to. If you are in range, you have to do it early like that. Obviously, if you do it from out here, their attackers are gonna hit you anyway. So that's why you see that happening right there, even though I'm doing it late because they're not hitting. I could just punish them with this or this, right? I don't have to do this. This is for more when you are in range, but you have to make a hard call. You have to say, he is about to press a low right now, so I am going to jump. If you try to wait until you see the low and then do it, it's not going to work out. But this move isn't used very often, so you don't have to worry about using this. And then the last move we have is the legendary falling crane. Now there are a lot of people that don't know the Chun-Li matchup as well. They get bamboozled by this move a lot and probably think that it's broken or something like that. Like, oh, that move is so freaking annoying. I keep getting caught by it because it does give you a lot of advantage if you use it against your opponent. Can stop moving for me, please? I'm trying to do something. Okay, he's not gonna let's just go ahead and put block all on. Okay. So we do get advantage. Remember we were saying before with this. This is the same thing except it's even worse for your opponent. If they try to press anything and you're doing certain moves, they will get blown up for it. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Let's go ahead with this one. There we go. See? They try to press. I mistimed that one. That's the only reason that worked. If they try to press something, right, they're gonna lose the exchange. Alright, so and how you do this is down forward. As you can see, if you look at the left side at my command inputs there, you see how the arrow is pointing down forward. So it's forward, and it's like diagonal forward down. And then you do that and press the heavy kick button. Now this move is very, you have to really position yourself correctly, because if you do it from too far away, she's just gonna land right in front of them, and there's nothing else that you can do. Like your opponent can destroy you while you're doing this. So you have to space. If you don't space yourself perfectly, you're gonna land in front of them, and you can't do anything with that. So you have to be like at the perfect range. If you push them too far out, you will land in front of them. Right. So you have to space it perfectly. Now this move, you can. I wouldn't advise using this as too much of a crutch. It does work against lower ranked players, but and a lot of people would say that it's cheap or it's a gimmick or something like that. But Chun-Li, as we will discuss later on, has an awful jump. This is pretty much her jump. So doing that is pretty much the same as doing this, which is something called a cross-up. It's basically where you're jumping right over your opponent, and you're doing most characters in the game have a cross-up. Not everyone, but most characters have a game that will hit your opponent from behind. So in order to block that, they actually have to block the opposite way. See, where Ken is at right now, he has to hold right on his thumbstick or peripheral in order to block. Right. If I do a cross-up, you actually have to block the other way. Now, the cross-up, it's a way of confusing your opponent by jumping over them, and it's a way to just like kind of apply pressure when you're jumping. If you time it well, it can be difficult to block them. So that's pretty much what a cross-up is. You don't have to worry about that too much here. Um, in another video, for if we need to get into more general mechanics for Street Fighter, I can definitely go over that. But yeah, that's pretty much what a cross up is. This is pretty much an easier method of a cross up for her because her jump isn't really good. She has a very floaty jump. She stays in the air longer, and it just makes it easier for her to be hit out of the air, and it makes it harder to place your jumps on people. Whereas characters like Ken, it's going to be a lot easier for them to jump on you, right? So that's pretty much what this is. This is her quote unquote jump. Lower rank players will get bamboozled by this. But when you start fighting like really high ranked players, they know how to deal with that. So you don't want to get too much into a habit of using it to try to crutch a win when you're struggling. Unfortunately, Chun-Li is just not that type of character where you can gimmick people out that much. Not that this is too much of a gimmick. To those that are having difficulty blocking this is akin to them just having difficulty blocking people jumping on them. So it's it's pretty much the same thing. So it's not really too cheap or anything. It's not. I wouldn't say it's cheap at all, to be honest with you. It's just a jumper. So, and that's pretty much it for all of her normals. Let's see. I think did I miss anything? I didn't explain some of this. This tool is pretty much only going to be useful for poking in this range. It's not very good for defense because it puts you way out there. So if your opponent, if you're trying to stop an approach with this, it's not the best tool for that. It's better to use something like this or this or this or this, right? And it's not good for offense unless your opponent is in burnout, which is something we will discuss another time. But if you're rushing your opponent down, they're more likely to hit drive impact, which means this move is not going to be as useful. So it's more useful for those that are playing more of a poke. I'm going to make you whiff and then punish it type game. This move, anti-air, only useful for people playing aggression more offensively if you really like once you become like more intermediate to advanced or higher. This move is not. You can throw it out in neutral once you get more intermediate to advanced, but it's better for defensive players. This is like the best use for this move, right? The best use case. But technically, you can use it in all three categories. This move can be used for pressure, but only in very specific setups that I don't want to go over too much because we don't want it to be. We don't want to go over too much advanced stuff. But just take my word for it. You don't want to just throw this out when they're blocking. It's not really that useful for that. It's useful for very specific setups, like after you knock your opponent down, something like that. So, but in that regard, it can be used offensively. It can be used if you're playing more of a poke type of thing. So if your opponent is pressing buttons, and you catch them with this, all right. So it can be used for that. And it can be used for defense to stop approaches. For if your opponent is trying to jump over to you from across the screen, you can throw this move out as a wall. So this can be applied in all three. It's probably at its most useful as an aggressive move though, for offensive players. This move is best used in situations where if you're in like poke range like here. It's not very good for when you're playing back here. And offensively, when you're rushing your guard down, it's also not good. It's more for if you're in a situation where you're in, like you're poking your opponent, right? More of a mid-range type thing. That's when you would use this move. But again, don't just throw this move out. It's not very useful for them. And then we went over this. This can be used aggressively if you know the setups, not for beginners, I would say. It can. When you're in poke range, I wouldn't use this move because it doesn't have enough range to really poke people with, unless there's a very specific matchup setup. But for beginners, you don't need to be worried about matchup stuff. And from back here, Only going to be useful really if you're using it as like an anti-air or something like that. But then you can probably just use this, right? So, I think that's all of her moves and how they can be useful in the three main basic play styles. That's all of her normal moves. Next, we're going to go over the specials. Chun-Li's special moves are she can't use them to really pressure people and stuff like that much. They mainly have a specific use. And for special moves in these games, each special move has a light version. This is her lightning kicks, which is quarter circle in forward light kick. She has a medium version, which is the medium kick, and then she has a heavy version, which is the heavy kick. Right. All three of these are used for very specific situations or in combos. You do not want to just throw this stuff out because your opponent can destroy your soul if you do that. If we go ahead and set Ken to do something on block like this, we can't block because we are in a disadvantageous situation. Same thing with this one. This one, they can't hit you, but it's still a bad situation to be in. While it's not as bad as being hit outright, this is putting you in a situation where you can end up taking damage. Without getting too advanced, just take my word for it and try not to use this move, but technically it is safe. They can't. This is the heavy version. They cannot punish you for doing this, but I would advise not using it. Right? Unless it's a very special situation. But for beginners, try not to get into the habit of using this. This is still a habit that I'm in the process of breaking myself from when I started playing this game. So, but it will get you killed when you fight people that know what they're doing. And other than that, it's mainly used for combos. Like if we do some basic stuff, right? Like that, like this. She can also do it in the air. Same score. She has all three different strengths with it. The ones in the air are only used for very specific setups and combos, but they are not common. I wouldn't worry about them too much as a beginner. And they can be used to punish certain things. Like we were talking about Ken doing this bullcrap earlier. Remember that? Oh wait, I did that wrong. Sorry. Ken being annoying with that bullcrap. This is one of the few things that if a Ken spaces it perfectly, this is one of the few things that can actually punish him for doing it like that. So this can be used to punish people because it knocks them down on if you get a punish counter with it. But you don't need to worry about that too much as a beginner. This is more of an advanced type thing. I would say like intermediate advanced to advanced. So this has a unique application as well. And of course, every special move also has an OD version. The OD version is safe on block, kind of like the heavy version, but it's still a bad situation to be in. I wouldn't recommend just throwing this out willy-nilly. Same thing with this. This can be used to punish certain things, but I wouldn't worry about that too much as a beginner. It can also be used to get more damage in combos because you can press the kick again in order to do it. Now, to do an OD special move, see, we already know how to do each lightning kicks, right? So if we wanted to do the OD lightning kicks, we would do the same input, which is quarter circle forward, and push any two kick buttons together. It doesn't matter which combination you do, it's going to be the same result, and they're going to have the same properties, right? And that's how you execute that. So you can use this to get a little bit more damage or in very special combos, right? And that's typically the use case for this. Same thing with the one in the air, right? The one in the air does does a pretty hefty amount of damage. See, that's quite a bit of damage right there. So, but other than combos other than combos, as a beginner, you don't have to worry about this too much. other than like certain bread and butter combos in order to finish your opponent off, right? That we'll get into that a little bit later, of course. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it for her lightning legs. They're pretty much going to be useful to you for combos. You do not want to just throw these moves out willy nilly. Unfortunately, Chun-Li is not like Kin, where you can throw out bullcrap like this, right? You can't do that. Next up, we got spinning bird kick. You got the light spinning bird kick, medium, and heavy. All three of these are terrible to use outside of combos. You don't use these to punish people. You don't use these to give you an advantage if your opponent blocks it, because you will lose the game if your opponent blocks that. If we set them to block all. See, all of these are put you at a very terrible disadvantage on block. So if your opponent presses a button, any button pretty much, you're so negative that they can punish that much more heavily than just a jab. Right. So you don't want to throw this move out. This is only useful for combos. Take my word for it. Bread and butter combos and things of that nature. The difference between the different kicks is the light one it doesn't go as far. The medium goes a little bit further, and the heavy one goes the furthest. And of course, each one does more damage than the next. So which one do we use? The ones that you would use are, depending on what your combo is, there are certain ones that can't combo. For example, if you do something like this, the heavy won't connect, and the medium also will not connect. See that? So if you're doing this specific combo or something like this, you can't hit them with the medium or heavy. So that means you have to use the light version, right? And that's the main application as to why you would use the light over any of the other versions, right? As for the medium version has very specific, because some of the properties of the medium version are a little bit different from the light and heavy version, which will allow you to do certain things that off of those that you can't do with the light and heavy version. But that's not going to be for a beginner video. That's going to be more like intermediate to advanced, right? But when we get into, so that's pretty much the gist of it, of why you would use different strengths. If you can apply it, it's, as a beginner especially, it's almost always going to be better to just use the heavy version, because you'll get more damage and carry them closer to the corner, which if you get your opponent in the corner, you are at a big advantage. You want to get them to the corner, and you don't want to be put in the corner. That's pretty much how this game, one of your primary goals with Chun-Li is to get them to the corner as fast as you can. Yeah, these are pretty much for combo. You don't want to use them for any other purpose. The OD version, same thing. You don't want to just throw this out randomly, because you can get blown up for it if your opponent blocks it. Right. You are very negative on that. So this is mainly for very specific combo setups. Right. That's pretty much it. A spinning bird kick is a combo tool. It's the backbone of Chun-Li setting up most of her damage in combos, and in a lot of different setups that Chun-Li uses, right? But that's pretty much the use for spinning bird kick. Other than combos, you don't use it. Next up, we have Tensho kicks. This move is performed by double tapping down. So down, down, and then any of the kicks. You have the light version, the medium version, the heavy version. The difference between them is how high up she goes and how far out she goes. Though she doesn't go as far out with this move as other characters would do. And of course, they do more damage. Typically speaking, the heavier the special move, the more damage you get, right? That's how it works. And these are pretty much very specific combo tools, or most primarily an anti-air. Now in Street Fighter, most characters, not all of them, but a lot of characters have a very specific move that is used to be an anti-air. Remember we were talking about moves like this, and this? These are her anti-airs. Now, the unfortunate thing is that she is susceptible to being hit out of them when you use them. See how I'm trading with him here? He's hitting me out of this one. Right. So there is a good chance that you will get hit out of these moves, right? This move is a specialized anti-air. And when a character has a special move that is using an anti-air, it's supposed to be invincible to when you first start the move, it is supposed to be completely invincible to any attempt that your opponent has to hit you. So if you time it right, your opponent pretty much cannot hit you out of this. And that's why pro players will tell you that you want to use this type of anti-air, because if they're in the air, it's going to work, right? If they jump, you want to use it. The thing with Chun-Li is that this is hard to use for the reasons I explained earlier. It's hard to use it on reaction because you have to stop what you're doing and anticipate your opponent jumping. And there are other reasons why it's not that great, but we're not going to get into it. If you're playing on Modern especially, you always want to use this because Modern, this is like a cheat tool, right? It's going to be... Chun-Li is very good on Modern because she gets to use this effect. We said, keeping people from jumping is very important. If you can use this, and you are comfortable with it, and you don't have any issues using it, use this over her other anti-airs. Other than this, obviously, you can use this to get more damage for very specific scenarios if you're like a higher ranked player and you really know the game and you know your matchups and stuff, then you can use this. But generally speaking, if you can comfortably use this, this is your go-to anti-air. By all means, if you use it, if you can. But I know a lot of players have trouble using this, so we often use this move. But that's pretty much what this is for. It's an anti-air. And also for very specific combo conversions. Like, let's say, for example, we do something like this. It's a combo ender, right? And yeah, that's pretty much the use for it. You can do some strange combos, kind of, but they're not recommended, right? These are only recommended for specific combos that we will go into a little bit later. Let's see. What other special moves do we have? We have the Kakoken. You have your light version, medium, heavy. The light version takes the longest to come out and the longest to recover from. So you are more vulnerable when using this. This one is better used farther away. Now, unfortunately, all three of her fireballs disappear. The light version takes the longest to disappear. The medium version disappears faster, but it also travels faster. And the heavy version comes out faster. It travels faster, but it disappears almost immediately. So, this version is primarily useful. This is the light version. This is primarily useful for if you want to approach your opponent from a distance. You can throw this and use it as a shield. If your opponent tries to advance like this, obviously if you're just sitting here, they can just walk up and just kind of do anything, right? If you try to walk up to them like this, you're at risk of getting hit by something. But if you throw a fireball first, your opponent can't hit you, right? Only very specific characters can like just magically just go through the fireball and hit you, right? But generally speaking, you can use this as a barrier between you and your opponent. This allows you to approach them, right? So it's very, very useful for people that are trying to play more aggressively. This is, again, the light Kakoken. If you're an aggressive player, you can throw this bad boy and then walk behind it. It's not as good as Ken throwing a fireball and then drive rushing behind it or something like that. It's not quite as good, but Chun-Li can still do it, right? The reason why it's not as good is because it disappears. which is not something you have to worry about too much because only intermediate or advanced players will know how to really deal with this effectively. But that's pretty much its main use, and you can throw this out as well if you're more defensive player to try to in the way opponents. Now this isn't going to work against every matchup. Chun-Li is not the strongest fireball character because you do have to charge this move. You perform the Kikoken by holding back for approximately 2 seconds and then pushing forward and pressing any of the punch buttons, right? That's how you perform it. You can also hold down back and then press forward and fire off the Kikoken, right? But because you have to charge this move, it makes her more predictable, which means your opponent is going to be able to read when you're firing the Kikoken more, which means players have to come up with inventive ways like jabbing and neutral in order to hide when they're charging the Kikoken. And unfortunately, you cannot charge it while you're moving forward because you have to hold back, right? So you can't charge it while moving forward, unfortunately, and that's one of the caveats of this move. Like I said, you can use it as a shield. Aggressive players are really going to like the light version because it allows you to pressure your opponent because they kind of can't just attack you with their buttons when you're approaching them because there's a fireball in their face. If they press something like this, they're going to get hit, right? So otherwise you would get hit without the fireball there. But because there is a fireball there, they can't just hit you. So it's very good for people that want to get their offense started. So for aggressive players, A+, right? If you're more a poke range, if you're trying to poke people back here, you're going to be more using the medium version and the heavy version. Heavy version comes out faster and recovers faster. So when you're this close, it's better to use the heavy version because you can jump scare your opponent with it. And also, if they decide that they want to jump, it's going to be harder for them to. It's going to be a lot harder for them to punish you for it because let's get Ken to stop repeatedly jumping here for just a moment. Okay, there we go. It's going to be a lot harder for them to nail you. And I'm not getting the Kikoken. Jeez, come on. Chun-Li, what are you doing? Okay, there we go. She doesn't want to do it, right? I'm not timing this, right? So if you throw it and your opponent jumps, they can't punish you for it. Like that, right? But if you do the faster version, it's a little bit harder. You can still get punished for it, but it's harder. So when you're this close to you, because because it recovers faster and it comes out faster, it's just better to use this. So if you're trying to be in this range playing here, this is the one you want to use. And if you're playing more aggressively, like in their face, you can also use it the heavy version as well. Poke range, you're going to be using the medium and heavy versions. And back here, if you're trying to turtle, you're going to be using the light version because it stays out longer, which means your opponent has to deal with it a little bit longer than the other ones, right? It's also used for aggressive players, but not this close. You typically don't want to use the slower Kikoken this close. This is mainly to help get your offense started, right? So you start from back here and then you rush in and, or you can just walk up to them. It's also it also makes your opponent's jumps predictable. So if you're fighting somebody, there's a if you're having trouble deciding if somebody's going to jump, if you're throwing fireballs all day long, they're probably going to jump at some point. Since they can't do much else, it makes it a lot easier to predict the jumps, which makes it easier to do setups like this. All right. Same thing with this. It makes it a lot easier to play that game, right? If you fought Ryu and Nakuma, you know what I'm talking about. They will throw fireballs at you until the cows come home, and if you jump, so you're getting, right? That's yeah, that's pretty much the Kikoken. Those are the applications for it. It can also be used, like I said, to pressure and annoy people, but we're gonna get into that a little bit more when it comes to using the stances and stuff like that. But yeah, that's gonna be pretty much the Kikoken. Last special move we have on our list here is going to be the Hasitsu. Now she has the light version, the medium version, and the heavy version. The light version is primarily now the light and medium versions are not used that much. You can kind of use them as a jump scare when you're right in front of your opponent because they're faster, but she is quite unsafe. Well, on the light version at least. The medium version, technically your opponent can't punish you for doing it, but this is a situation that can lead to you losing the game, so I wouldn't recommend doing it. The thing with these is that your opponent has to stand block them. If they are crouching, this will hit them. So we put the opponent to block all and to crouch, and switch block to crouching block only. All right, this will hit them. It's an overhead, kind of like we discussed earlier, like this, right? So this will actually hit them. Now, the thing with this is that these moves are very high risk to use, the light and medium version especially. The heavy version goes the furthest, but it's the most predictable. It's the one that people are going to use the most, and most of your opponents know that. So they're going to be looking for you to do it if you're far out here, and good players are going to be ready for it when you use this. This isn't a move where it's very good to just throw it out. This is used in a very, very, very specific situations and setups. And if you make a hard call out on your opponent throwing fireballs, that's pretty much the use case of this, right? So that's what you would use it for, and then if you make a call out, then you can actually get a combo off of it. All right. So that's the use case for it. Kind of the same thing with these, except you use these when you're a little bit closer. But most Chun-Li players don't use this when they're close to the opponent because it's just reacting to a fireball this close. Your opponent has to be insanely predictable, because this move is not the best at going over fireballs. It doesn't go through them. You have to arc over it, which means you have to time it perfectly. Otherwise, you're gonna eat a fireball if you don't time it perfectly, right? So it's not like other characters where they go through it, right? The OD version is punishable on block, but it goes through fireball. So you can use it while fireball is right on top of your body pretty much, and it will just completely go through it, right? So if you want to make a really hard call out, this will put them into a state where they hit the ground, and then you can get a nice combo. You could probably get a bigger combo than that, but I am not used to using this move because essentially it's just not the most useful move. With dealing with fireballs, it's better to just slowly inch your way in than to try to YOLO out a Hasenshu, because people that are a little bit more savvy are going to destroy you for using this. So I wouldn't recommend using this, just throwing it out to try to skip neutral, because it is not a very good neutral skip. And if you wonder what a neutral skip is, that's going to be for another video. But take my word for it, if you really want to advance with Chun-Li, try to only use this to catch your opponent if you make a hard call out on them throwing projectiles. Right, so that's pretty much how it sent you. And I forgot to go over the OD Katoken. The OD Katoken is OD fireballs have a bit more. So if you're in a fireball war with, like, say, Kin here, his fireball will be beat. He would have to throw 2 fireballs in order to beat this, but he's not going to be able to do that because of how fast it is, right? If you throw a regular fireball, they trade, right? So if your opponent is really launching fireballs at you, and you're having trouble dealing with it, characters like Guile or Sagat are launching fireballs, you can kind of use this in order to allow you to approach them, because their fireballs are going to be eaten by that, right? Unless your opponent does an OD fireball as well, like this. Sorry, I'm messing that up. unless they do one as well, you can always count on your fireball beating a regular one, right? So that's pretty much the use case for it. It can be used in when you're pressuring people, but only in very specific situations. Newer players don't have to worry about doing the OD fireball for anything outside of if your opponent is being very oppressive with fireballs and you want to approach them. Like, you want to have a plan for when you use this. Don't just do this. Haha, I'm getting damage on him, because then you're going to get like this. And even if beginner players don't punish you for being in this burnout state, better players are going to destroy you if you're in this state. You don't want to be in that state, right? So you don't want to just use this to try to jump scare people unless they are about to lose the game, like one more hit and they're dead, and you want to try to like, and you get a read on their pattern and you just throw it out, right? You want to be judicious with this. It's not something for you to just waste your meter on, right? And for also for this move, which is the OD Tensho kicks. Sorry if it's a little bit scrambled. I didn't go over the OD versions of these moves. This is for if your opponent is pressuring the life out of you. Let's go ahead and get the bot to start pressing buttons. And you're in a guessing situation and you're tired of it, you can just press that. Get them off of you. It's completely invincible to pretty much any move that your opponent can do in the game. So even if they are pressuring you, they can do that. I mean, you can use that to get out of it, right? It's the same thing. Remember the example we gave earlier? If we do this to Ken, technically he can't press anything through that, but he can do his OD reversal through it. And it's the same thing for us. Right. We can, it's often affectionately known as mashing because people are normally like really mashing their buttons to try to get this out when they're being pressured, right? So it's affectionately called known as mashing. But this is a get off of me tool, pretty much. That's what this is for. It can also be used to get a little bit more damage to end the game if you're in the middle of a combo, but that's going to be for like, you don't need to worry about that too much in the beginner stages, but it does do more damage. So if you're doing a combo like this and you need a little bit more damage, you can technically do this. See, that's just objectively more damage. Right. So, but yeah, those are the use cases for all of her special moves, pretty much, all of the amped up versions of them. Let's see, I think we went over all of the special moves here. So something else that we want to go ahead and look at are, we're going to look at the bread and butter combos.